Danielle, can you tell us in your own words how the mineral world has really gotten the trajectory that it has? I mean, the practice has become so much more universal. There's so many more collectors. It's something that people have been doing for millennia, and yet right now we're seeing this huge boom in desirability, the impact that it has in social culture. We're seeing values go up like crazy. What is your unique perspective on that?
Hmm. It's a great question. And I think the key word that you used was universal. Um, Something that I learned along the way, and I didn't even know I was learning it, the progression that I watched being sort of organically in the industry and as starting off as a collector and evolving into a dealer or a delector, as we've used sometimes, and then ultimately to a dealer today, has was unbeknownst to me. It was just happening. And what I've done over this time is been able to connect the dots to understand how this universal appeal has has put its dominant foot down and sort of pushed crystals and minerals into a whole new stratosphere of appreciation, value, desirability, uh, recognition, and just affection from collectors and amateurs, connoisseurs, all different walks of life over the last, 30, 40 years to arrive where it is today, where it is finally being acknowledged and recognized by people as on par with the finest arts in the world, the most valuable objects that mankind acquires, possesses, collects, etc. And we're seeing that by a virtue of the values that they are paying for these objects. So the universal appeal, that factor, is something that you can see in the eyes of children. You can see it in collectors that get exposed to crystals and minerals for the first time in fine minerals, in displays, in properly lit cabinets, things where the specimens are celebrated in a way that they deserve to be. And when they see that, the wonder, the awe just all clicks. There's like this aha moment, and I've witnessed that time and time again. I used to witness it in my parents' basement when I was a kid, and my friends would come over, or my father would invite people over to see the collection, and they would look at the room and just be like, "Whoa, what is this?" And then all the ensuing questions, who made this? Who's the artist? How did you carve that? How did you glue those two together? All the things that, you know, don't apply. Um, and so with that, you got to see this aha moment happen organically. And what I learned by watching this time and time again over a long period of time is that crystals and minerals have a unique universal appeal, different than other collectibles. Um, and that's not to say that other collectibles do not have that, but there are subsets that I feel like have a ceiling and a cap
Mhm.
because of the nature of what they are. So, like sports memorabilia. Sports memorabilia sells at fantastic prices, but not at the prices of the finest artworks, not at the prices of the finest sculptures. They don't reach those values, and that's because not everyone appreciates sports and sport memorabilia. Um, there's a there's a correlation to the arts that appreciate, and if you listen to certain names, they are synonymous with almost everyone in the world who has been exposed to arts and collectibles and things like that. And I'll say like Van Gogh, Rembrandt, Monet. Everyone knows these artists. Everyone automatically correlates these things, their works, to exceedingly high rarity, desirability, value. And when you think about the fact that you also have that parallel with things that have achieved incredible values, in the gems, in the crystals, everyone knows emerald, everyone knows diamond, everyone knows sapphire, everyone knows ruby. Not everyone knows rhodochrosite, not everyone knows calcite. But these these other mineral species and even the semi-precious minerals that are not entirely well known are now reaching a level of interest and recognition that they hadn't before. And I believe that's because those other collectibles that I said had a ceiling, they have a limit to the audience. The audience that enjoys crystals and minerals is infinite.
Mhm.
There's no person on the planet that I've ever witnessed seeing minerals or crystals for the first time or the 100th time that looks at them and goes, "Oh no, these are garish. They're awful. I don't like these. I hate these." They interact with them as something wondrous, as something of lore, something of treasure. And when you make the connections and the parallels to the top gem minerals or crystals in the world, emerald, sapphire, diamond, tourmaline, topaz, and you compare those to uh, the concept that these are rare and desirable and they have history, and that Egyptians and Romans were collecting gold and diamond and sapphire and corundum and spinel and using them in jewels, and these were valuable things, these were perceived as ultimate values. Then it's easy to see how a crystal of an emerald could be valued in the same way and be cherished, especially when it's got incredible luster, incredible form, incredible clarity, and beauty on a contrasting matrix. I mean, what I'm describing is millions and millions of dollars in an emerald specimen. Now, it might also have an intrinsic value and might be able to be cut into gems and yield also a high level of value. But what I can say is that when the crystal specimen forms at its highest level, its value surpasses exponentially the value of it intrinsically turned into jewelry. And that's almost in every instance. There are a few exceptions in diamond and emerald and ruby. But in general, that law applies. And that's because of the rarity of the objects that exist, that the planet has created and produced and that have been discovered compared to the gems. So for every single emerald crystal that you have, there's thousands of cut stones. So the rarity is a huge aspect. And because of this appeal, because of the fact that everyone looks at and is exposed. It's exposure as well. You're exposed to these concepts when you're young. The same way that at some point I learned that Rembrandt was an important artist, I learned that emerald was a valuable crystal and a valuable material. And then as you progress that knowledge, you start to expand and you start to learn about the other species in the mineral kingdom. You start to learn about the other artists in the art world, in the community of worldwide artists, and you start to learn about Vermeer, and you start to learn about Caravaggio and other such artists that created masterpieces. There are masterpieces in the mineral kingdom that are incredible and so rare and so precious that they are being appreciated and they have no ceiling. They have no limit, just like the paintings and the sculptures that we're discussing as well by these artists have no limit. And that is because of the audience and the worldwide appeal. They, everyone recognizes and quickly appreciates the the value and the importance of these objects once they get a little bit of exposure and understanding.
Absolutely. I can recall so many times when people, little kids to people in their 70s, 80s, even 90s coming in and seeing the pieces. And sometimes there's this immediate disbelief that they're even real, that we didn't make them, that we didn't fabricate them. And the minute that the recognition comes in that they're naturally formed, that they're millions of years old, that we didn't polish them or cut them or add in the color, that's when this kind of childlike wonder,
Hmm.
the eyes light up. It's
Yeah.
incredible to see. As you mentioned, everyone just kind of goes back to this image of, treasure hunting as a
Hmm.
kid. And that's what really that universal appeal. And it's kind of the same audience when you're in a, museum looking at a beautiful painting. You see the little kids stopping and, they stop their tantrums and they're just looking at it. And you get the same thing in the mineral world, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's I've noticed it also like through my career, sort of being in the shadows in a crystal hall or a mineral and gem hall at some of the big major museums around the world, and watch the interaction of people as they come through, and just like you had at the Mardani Gallery in New York when we had that open, I'm sure you saw that it's that moment, that wonder when they look at it and they're just pointing. And everyone has a different reaction. Some are quiet and they're just sort of like studying. Some are, audible and like, wow, look at that. Oh my God. Look, I love this one. It reminds me of this. But all of those interactions that are so varied, as various as people are, they express like I said, there's never this detest,
Yeah.
and there's always this attraction, and it's this correlation to lore and treasure hunting that goes deep into our psyche and to our cultures all around the world. And so I think that's what's been able to elevate the the collectible of crystals and minerals. One example that I always like to give is the carousel horse example. And I think this really punctuates the concept of appeal and ceiling at the same time. And so, if you look at the generations that grew up with access to carousels, that spent their childhood, enjoying and riding on a carousel, those are generations going back 150 years maybe. And the boomers, they were a generation that was sort of on the fringe, and they grew up with them as children, and were on them and appreciated them because it brought back nostalgia, and it brought back this feeling of connection. And so at some point in the mid 80s, carousel horses that were collected as antiques from rare carousels here in the United States and some from overseas in Europe started to increase in price. And they would have a sleigh that was on a carousel, or they would have a dragon, or they would have a horse. And the more ornate, the more rare, the more unusual, the more finely preserved, the more valuable. And these became collectible, and people acquired them and put them in their environments. They put them in homes and living rooms as decor, and they were fabulous. And the prices started to escalate, and it started to go from $10,000 for a nice horse or animal from a carousel, all the way up to hundreds of thousands at the peak. But what happened was this transition and this lack of universal appeal.
Mm.
And it's not just universal appeal, but it's universal appeal with connection to multiple generations
Mm.
and future generations. So the appeal for crystals and minerals is going to continue generationally. And like arts, like the ultimate in sculptures and contemporary arts and the old masterworks, those things will continue generationally, as do crystals and minerals.
So the disconnect between generations is often, you know, forecasting what we can consider a future trend. So obviously there are so many pieces with great provenance, amazing provenance stories like the Heliodor that you wrote the article on in the Minrec, and which yeah, that was a great story of like this Holmesian type of journey to
Mm.
find the history of a piece. And so finding all of these interesting connective threads throughout history and how they link our generations with our parents and maybe even our kids, because you take your kids out onto a family trip and you go rock hounding, or you've got your pieces in your cabinet and you can talk to the kids about it. It's educational, it's fun, it can involve being outside, inside. There are a lot of generational gaps it does help to merge in the practice of collecting. So you were saying that it follows this trend, it allows us to kind of bridge the gaps.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's this connection between universal appeal, generational interest, and trends that you're talking about is what has propelled collecting crystals and minerals to a new level of values, interest, and desirability. And that has punctuated itself in the world market because we're seeing people collecting at new levels. They're willing to pursue and compete and pay prices that were never achieved before, and that are setting new benchmarks semi-annually for objects that deserve to be celebrated at the highest level. The Mona Lisas, the uh, lady with pearl earrings, the David of the mineral kingdom, the crystal kingdom, uh, are the objects that are defining themselves and trading at values that have never been seen before, but without a ceiling. It's just going to continue because those objects can't be replicated. And the ability to do that is it's just in part with this concept of universal appeal and with generational interest, but it also is is highly predicated on the fact that you have new people involved and the reasons they're involved, which is another long conversation. And then ultimately, the really quintessential word that has changed this collectible and moved it to this new place amongst the other finest art collectibles in the world is perspective.
Mm.
When you have perspective of what it is, when you have knowledge and you have information about something, you're able to excise very accurate interpretation and valuation of an object. And with that perspective, you're able to invest and stand behind it to put yourself in a position where um you are it's more of a profound understanding,
Mm.
and that allows you comfort in investing. And when more and more people are having that same comfort, that same perspective, that's when it moves. And that's what's happened. And it's going to continue to move. So that should be another discussion that we have. It should be the who and why, and then the perspective and how that parallels to fine arts.
I think it's the third conversation because you touched on the fact that um, these, you didn't say it in these words, but these are finite resource as well. You're
It's a whole other
finally on one,
conversation. Yeah.
and it's it's really treasure hunting in the largest sense. You can't make prints, you can't reproduce them as much as people have tried, and then we've had to police them. Um, you're not finding the best pieces out there. They don't come every day. They're a limited resource. They're sporadic. Maybe you find one every 10 years, if even, and they're completely different. So
Yeah.
that's another conversation too.
Agreed. That's a great conversation to have. I love that.